Okay, so today we're going to be taking a look at a MacBook Pro. This is an A1297 model. This one is one that we don't see very often because it is a 17-inch version of the MacBook Pro. Let's see if I can focus in there. When this one came out, it was quite expensive at the time, mostly because it was the highest end model. I believe this has an i7 processor as well, so back when this first came out, this was actually a pretty expensive laptop. But today what we're going to be doing is replacing the battery and the whole top Palmrest assembly. So we have this right here. This is going to be the replacement top. This one had water damage, so it has issues with the trackpad and the keyboard. Definitely you can replace the trackpad and the keyboard separately on this model, but it was cheaper for us to just replace the whole top. We got this for a pretty cheap price, around $40 for the whole top, which was just better because it's also not only it's got a working keyboard, but it's in a little bit better condition than the original one. So we're going to be replacing the whole top. It's going to have a new touchpad, new keyboard, everything you can see. It came with all the brackets and the expansion slot there, and so we're going to do that now. And we also have a battery here. This just came in. This is the battery. So this is a genuine Apple battery. This one is an A1309, so if you need to order a battery for this model, it is A1309, and that's the part number, so if you need to find it, that's what you would look up. So the first thing we're going to do is take off the bottom screws. We've already done this here just for simplicity. If you need to know, the screwdriver you'll need for that is a Phillips PH00. There are 4 screws up at the top, 2 on the side there, and another 4 down here at the bottom. And once those are out, you can just simply lift the bottom off, and then you'll immediately have access to the whole inside of the laptop. We have the hard drive down here. We have the battery. This looks like a aftermarket battery, so that would probably explain why it is bad. You can see this is an A1309, but it's labeled rechargeable battery pack, so this is probably, well, it's most definitely an aftermarket battery, which probably explains why it went bad. Anyway, this has 2 sticks of RAM in here, so both 4 gigs each, so this got 8 gigs of memory. The fans, motherboard, the DVD drive, wireless cards up here, again hard drive, expansion port, and the screen connector, and the power jack. So with that being said, we're going to start taking everything apart and get the new keyboard in. So we've gone ahead and already unplugged the battery, so that's the first thing you're going to want to do. For this one, it just pulls straight out like that, and then the battery is free. And it looks like this one doesn't have any screws in it, which is a little odd, but there would normally be 3 screws. There'd be one here, here, and here that you would have to remove. Those are typically the Y screwdriver bit, so Y1 tip would work. We use a iFixit kit here from the ProTech toolkit, which has all these bits, and the Y tri head screw is what's used there. And we also like to use this little mat here that's labeled, so when you take your screws out, you'll know exactly where they go. I would definitely recommend that if you're doing work on this laptop, because there are a lot of different screws, different screw sizes, etc. So since there's no screws in this battery, I guess we'll just pull it right out. You can lift up by this tab, and then it should pull right out like that. You can see some of the residual liquid damage that's inside of here. Like I said, it was spilled on before, so that is why it looks a bit crusty. We're going to switch to a Phillips 00 bit again, which is what we use to take the bottom screws out. And we're going to remove the hard drive, so we have 2 screws right here. And we're going to take those 2 screws out, loosen them, and then this whole bracket can be removed. With that bracket out, we can now take the hard drive out, so just be careful because it's still connected to the actual ribbon. So you just kind of want to hinge it up, lift it up a tiny bit, and then remove this connector here, like so. And just like that, the hard drive is disconnected. Put that off to the side. And now we can start disconnecting some of the connectors on the motherboard here. So we have one right here, which I believe is for the speaker assembly, so that will lift straight up like so. We have one here for the DVD drive. You can unplug that, lift it up just like that. And we have another one here for, this might be another speaker, I'm assuming. So this one might have been the wireless, but this also lifts straight up, so just be careful. It doesn't pull out, it goes upwards like so. And we also have this is a ribbon cable here, a flex connector. So for this, I'll try to zoom in so you can see a tiny bit better. You're going to want to lift up the black tab here, and then you'll be able to pull that out like so. Moving on to this side, we have these shields covering some other connectors. So we're going to need to take those off, and for that we're going to use a Torx. Looks like a T6 screwdriver will be perfect for the job. And we have 2 screws, both of the same size, so we'll have to remove those. And take the shield off, put that off to the side. And here we have the keyboard connector, and this might be the touchpad. So this one, the touchpad one on the left, will just lift up like so. And the one on the right is the keyboard, which is also a flex connector, so you have to lift up that little black tab there, like so, and then the connector will pull straight out. And then you can latch it back down. So those are those 2, and then we have 2 more under this shield. These 2 are, interestingly enough, Phillips screws. For whatever reason, Apple chose to use Phillips for one and Torx for the other. I don't know why, but either way, I'll have to remove those 2. Okay, and we have another flex connector here, so lift the black tab and pulls straight out like so. And then the next one is one that will just pop up like that. And to the right of that we have another small tiny flex connector. So once again you're going to have to lift up the black tab there, and that should pull straight out like so. Next we have one that I had forgot earlier, which is the camera connector, which is up here. You're going to want to make sure that that gets removed. That goes to the screen for the iSight camera. So you will have to remove that. If I can try to be able to at least show it here, that you can just pull straight out like so, and put that off to the side. Next we're going to take out the fans, so we're going to need to switch back to our Torx screwdriver, back to our T6, and we have typically 3 screws. For whatever reason there's one missing there, so I guess we won't take that one out, but normally there would be one there. So we will put that off to the side and take the fan out. Now of course it's still connected to the motherboard, so lift up this piece of tape, and this is another connector that lifts straight up, so you make sure you're careful with that. And then these fans can come out, which we will have to clean at some point. And then we have the next fan over here, so we'll have to take these 3 screws out. And again, these are all the same size, so you shouldn't have any issues here. Same story, we have a connector here. You can simply lift that straight up, and that will pop right out. Next, we'll unplug the LCD connector. So this one's a little bit tricky. Just be careful with it, because these are quite often a little bit fragile. So I'm going to use a guitar pick here, or just any other tool to get under this black tab. And what you're going to want to do is lift that up. That will lift up this silver bar there, and then you can use that as leverage to pull the connector outwards like that, and then you've disconnected it, just like that. So now pretty much everything is disconnected from the motherboard in terms of cables. So now we're going to remove the motherboard screws so we can get the board out and transplant it into the new top assembly there. So to do so, we're just going to start removing the motherboard screws. We have one here, we have one down here, we have, let's see, we have one right there, and it looks like that's it. So try to remember where these screws go, because there are no labels on the board to signify that a motherboard screw goes there, even though there are quite a few different holes that look like screws should go into. Another thing you can remember is that there was a shield here, so it can't be those 2. There's a shield here, so it couldn't be any of those 2. The fan went here, so it couldn't be there. So once you put it back together, it's usually pretty easy to know, but just keep that in mind, and keep a mental note where each of the motherboard screws went, so you don't get yourself confused. So with that being said, now we're going to remove the DC in charging jack. Those 2 screws up there, these are actually Phillips screws. On many of the other models, these are Torx, but on this one it happens to be a Phillips screw, so same Phillips 00 bit. Throw that off to the side, and now we should be able to start lifting out the motherboard. So just do it very lightly and don't pull too hard, because there might be some connectors trapped, and this is where you'll often find out that you've forgotten one, like I've actually done here. So there is one right here that we're going to need to lift up the black tab on and pull that out, disconnect it, and now we should be able to pull the motherboard out. So always double check, make sure you're not applying too much force so you don't rip a connector out or anything like that. But as you can see, now the motherboard's out. We can put that off to the side. Now we're going to need to remove everything over here. This is the wireless antenna, the DVD drive, and the speaker. So we're going to need to start removing those now. Using screws. And we're going to take out these screws for the DVD drive as well and throw those off to the side. There is one also hidden down here that you'll need to remove. And to get that out. And we also have our Wi-Fi antennas, so you're going to want to disconnect those. So I will just disconnect those three. There's one there, and there's also one down here. And so we're going to need to unroute this cable so we can remove this antenna down here, which pops upwards straight up. At least it should. There we go. That is out. And we also have a screw up here and another screw down here as well, which need to come out so that we can get this whole assembly out of the case. And with that out, we can remove the last CD drive screw, which there is one right here. And now we should be able to remove the DVD drive. And once again, the speaker is held in with tape, so you'll just need to kind of pry that up. And then now there is one last screw right there for the speaker. And there's magnets in speakers, so you can kind of, if you don't have a screw tray, you can put the speakers in the over top of the speakers, and it will stick. The screws will stick to the magnet. So throw that off to the side, and you can see the indicator for liquid right here has gone red, so there's definitely something spilled on there. Last but not least, we have this little bracket that you'll need to remove the screw from, like so, and put that off to the side. And now we're going to need to remove the screen to transplant it into the new top. So for that, you're going to need a Torx screwdriver, T6, might be too small. Looks like we're going to actually have to use, let's see. Actually no, T6 is perfect. So for the screens, we like to remove 2 from each side first. That way you can open the screen enough. It will help you actually get the screen out easier. So we'll remove 2 from this side, and then on this side we actually have a bracket covering the hinge screws, so that'll have to come out first. There's a screw right here. These are both Phillips, so those will need to come out. And then those will come out. And let's see, we'll take that screw out like so. It looks like there is a little bit of adhesive on there, so that will need to pop off. And that will come out like so. And we'll remove the 2 hinge screws from this side, as we did before on the other side. So we'll have one there. And one here. And now we're going to want to actually remove the screen from the laptop, the LCD assembly. So for this, we're going to open the laptop up at a 90-degree angle. And we're going to put it on its side. It might be a little bit hard to see, but you're going to want to remove those screws and then pull the LCD from out of the top assembly. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it all in one go, but if I can zoom out enough, I might be able to show it. I'm going to remove the screw from each side. And once I have that done, the LCD screen should basically just fall right out like that, and now it's separated from the top. Now I'm going to look at our new top again, just to be sure that I have everything I need. This is the one that we just took apart, and we do have this bracket piece on the new. The old one has this bracket piece, and the new one also has it, so we don't need to transfer that. This metal bar is also here. We don't need to transfer that. All of this down here is also down there. The one thing we don't have is the ribbon cable for the hard drive, so that's going to need to come out. And so for that, we have two little screws holding that in. So we'll need to switch back to our Phillips 00 bit, and we will take those two screws out. I'll zoom back in so you can see it a little bit better. Two tiny screws there. And then now this can come out. This is taped down, and that will pull right out. And now we can put that into the new top we're using here. And I'm going to screw that in now, so that way we don't forget those little tiny screws that we had put off to the side. Screw that in. So now we should be good to go to start assembling everything. We're going to do everything in reverse order. So the last thing we did was take off the screen, so we're going to put the screen in now. Pretty simple procedure. You're just going to want to line it up, and much like how we took everything out, we're going to just basically lay the screen in and try to get those hinges into the machine like so. And it might take a little bit of wiggling to get it in, but as you can see right there, that just slid right in. And now you can start putting in those three hinge screws. Similarly to how we took out only two of them, and then we left one in, we're going to do the same procedure here. We're going to put only two in, and the reason we do that is because it is possible to put these screws in and then the screen not align with the rest of the case. So that's why we only put two in. That way we can adjust it if we need to. Typically you'll get it perfect the first time, but every once in a while when you put these in, sometimes it'll be slightly misaligned. So you're going to want to make sure to keep an eye on that. And the way you'll know it's not aligned is because when you shut the laptop, the top lid of the case doesn't align with the bottom of the case, and there's a little bit of overlap, or one side is too far over from the rest of it. And so now that I've got those two screws in, I'm going to shut the laptop. So now I've shut the laptop to see if it aligns, and looking at it here, we got a nice alignment, no overlap there, and everything looks good. So now we can start putting the motherboard back in and everything back in, just like we did before. So I'm going to put both the remaining hinge screws back in. There was one on each side that I didn't put in, so I could make sure that it was aligned correctly. So now those can go back in, like so. And you're going to make sure that those are pretty tight, that way the hinges aren't loose. And those are in there like that. And on this side we had that little bracket from before, so we're going to put that in the reverse order that we took it out. So like before, there was that little screw there, so that will need to come out. And now we can put these back in, but they were Phillips. So switch our screwdriver bit over, and we will put that screw right there. Okay, so now we can put the screw through this adhesive piece. So make sure that the hole in the adhesive lines up with the screw hole, and then you can put the screw through it down into the case. So now that's done, we can put we'll do the speaker. So for that, make sure that I zoom out there. And it's just laid in like before. So you can just lay that in there like that. And then put those screws in. We had that little one that was right there, and then there was the longer two that were on each side of the bottom part. And those bottom two ones are the same size, so you don't have to worry about mixing them up. Screw those both in. And just like that, it's in the computer perfectly. And so now we had the DVD drive. That will just lay in there like so. And then that had 3 screws of its own. And all of those are the same size also, so you don't have to worry about mixing those up. There's one on that side, and there was also one down here. It's a little bit hard to see. Screw that in. And then there was one that was covered by the antennas, so make sure that you put that screw in before you put the antenna piece on. Okay. And now we have, up here we have the antenna cover. That's going to have to go on now as well. Before we do that though, there was this bracket piece that also has to go on, which covers the antenna wires. So that just lays in there like that. And just like that. And that had a screw on the side as well. So that will need to be screwed in. Okay, now once that's in, we can go ahead and put this back on. And this is the mount for the antennas, so screw that back in. And now you're going to have to route all these cables one by one, which can be a little bit of a pain, but you have to snap these antenna wires all back in also. So those just should line up, and they just press in. So once you get them aligned with the connector side, you can just push down on it and it should click in. And then there was one here. And sometimes it's good to use a pair of tweezers if you have them to get it aligned, but don't use too much force, because if you're using too much force, then you're probably not aligned with it correctly. And you can break them pretty easily, so be careful when you do the antennas. Okay, so all 3 of those are in. Now the final one was the camera wire, which goes on the side here, a little bit underneath. So you have to route that in, like so, and that goes around, and that ends up plugging into the motherboard down here. So with that being said, we can put the motherboard in, and that will just lay in here like that. Put the DC connector in first, and then put it on a sort of 45-degree angle, like so, and then you can lower it down in. Now there are a lot of connections, so just be sure that the motherboard isn't going over top of them, any of the wires, which is sometimes difficult to do, especially on one like this that has so many different connectors. So I'm just trying to make sure that I have all of them above. There's one down here. Goes off to the side. And you can use like a screwdriver, or if you have tweezers, you can kind of sort of pull them up. That way you're not covering any of them. So we have this one here, that one. So we have covered with keyboards that will have to come out, and we have these 3. And so now we can start plugging stuff in. We have the camera wire down there, and make sure that that's routed correctly. So next we'll plug in the antennas. Like that, which just press down. And the DVD drive, and this bottom speaker here. And then we had this flex connector down here, which was for something that was on the side. I don't actually know what that one's for. I think that might be for the lid sensor. So push that in and push that tab down. And now I'm going to start putting in some of the motherboard screws. So we'll throw those in one by one. And there was originally one down here, so I'm just going to put that one in because I know one definitely went there. And then we had this down there for the touchpad and the keyboard next to it. Keyboard ones are sometimes a little bit tricky to go in, so you might have to look at it at a good angle, especially with gloves. It's actually a little bit harder. Should be able to in. Yep, that's in, and then push the black tab down to lock the connector in. Now we can put the shield over top of it again. And the one on the left was a Torx one, and the one on the right was a Phillips one, so make sure that you put the right screws in. I'll put the 2 Torx screws back in through the motherboard. And those are in. Now we can do the 2 from this side, which were we had this flex connector down here. Up, press that in, and put the latch back down. And we have this one, which was for the hard drive, and this one, which was for the battery indicator light, which again is also a flex connector, so you will have to pull it up first, lift up that black tab, and then you can insert the cable. So like I said, it's a little bit hard to do. And now that's in down there. Now we can plug the LCD back in, so to do that, like the same way we took it out, it just pushes in, like so, and then that metal bar comes down, and when you press that down, it should click into place, and that holds it to the motherboard so it doesn't come loose when the computer is shaken. Now I'm going to put back in the metal shield covering these connectors down here, so that just laid on there like that. And these ones were the Phillips ones. These ones are real tiny screws, so you're going to have to hold that down and then thread the screws in, just like this. And that will hold those down so they don't come loose. Next, I will start putting the fans in, and we have I'll start by doing the right fan first, or should I say left fan, but before you do that, you're going to want to plug in this flex connector down here, which goes underneath the fan. You don't want to forget about that, so plug that in and latch that back down, and then you can put the fan in, lift up the black tape that was covering the fan connector, plug that back in, and push it down. Tape back over it, and then you can put your fan screws back in. Fan screws are Torx, so you'll have to switch back to the Torx screwdriver, and there were 3 screws for each fan. So we had one that went there, and we have the remaining 2 on the left side. There and there, and then we have the right fan, plug that in, and the 3 screws for the right fan. Alright, so just like that, now we're going to put the remaining motherboard screws in. We have 2 more left. One that went down here. And we had another one that went up here. And so just like that, now the charging jack can be put back in. So I'm going to switch over to the Phillips screwdriver, and we're going to put those 2 screws in up here. One at the top, one at the bottom. Now we can put our new battery in, and that will just slide in like so, lay down in there, and plug the battery in. Now this battery goes underneath the computer, so keep that in mind when you go to plug it in. It's a little bit hard to see, but it should plug right in fairly easily. Now that that's plugged in, we can put our drive back in, and to do so, plug the flex connector back in, get the drive back in, and then you had this bracket that went there over the top, and that screws in. And just like that. Now, of course, also if you have battery screws, you're going to want to put those in now. This one didn't have them for whatever reason. When the battery was replaced, they didn't put them back in. So if you have those, definitely put those back in. We're going to find replacement ones. So I'll end the video here, but this was how to replace the top keyboard on a MacBook Pro A1297. That's a 17-inch laptop. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments. Feel free to subscribe to see our future videos, and I hope this helps.